Hi, I'm Chris, and here's how I got from England to the west coast of the USA without flying or driving. It's a chilly January day here in Suffolk in England, and over the last couple of years I've made some videos, which many of you may have seen, about travelling across the Atlantic on the Queen Mary 2. One of the issues that came up in the comments was, well, that's great if you want to travel from New York to England or from England to New York, but I live in, I don't know, the Midwest or California. How do I do it? Well, you perhaps should have watched some of my other videos about travelling across America by train. But what I'm going to do in this one is talk to you about the whole journey, how I did it, and why the journey should be the best part of the holiday. Now, I know with many people, getting to your destination on holiday as quickly, easily and painlessly as possible is the whole point of things. But there is another way you can do it, and you could make the journey absolutely part of the holiday. And if you do that, you can see and do some amazing things. And I think many people miss out on that. I decided to cross off a couple of bucket list trips a couple of years ago and travel on the Queen Mary 2 across the Atlantic and then get a train right across the USA. It turned out to be absolutely fabulous. Honestly, as a holiday on its own, I could have just flown straight home and it would have been something to remember. You could do it the other way as well. If you're coming from the west coast of the USA, you can get right the way across by train. It's actually really great fun, really memorable. Then you can take the magnificent Queen Mary 2 voyage across the Atlantic, and you can go to Southampton for England, or you can carry on to Hamburg for continental Europe. There's all sorts of things you can do from there. And of course the European train network is fantastic. So I started off my journey, I'm doing it east to west in Cambridge in England, which is where I lived at the time. And I don't know about you, but they have things called fly drive holidays, and they're great, but to me they're the worst two things about holidays. Flying, and driving. Driving's fine, of course, and you've got the freedom to go where you want. But on the other hand, I like to keep my eyes on the road, and particularly when another country, driving on the wrong side of the road, you don't get to see everything, which is such a shame. On the other hand, going on a train, wow, fantastic. Now, of course, just over 100 years ago, there was only one way you could have got from England to California, and that would have been to have taken a ship and then a train. Well, you can still do that journey, and it's now done in luxury. It's fabulous. So I started off in Cambridge and took the train to Southampton via London, which is fairly easy. You get a taxi across London if you've got lots of luggage, which I think a lot of people doing this sort of trip will do. Alternatively, you can actually start in Hamburg in Germany. A few people do that. The ship does go there on certain voyages, but not all of them. Then it's a question of getting the Queen Mary 2 across the Atlantic. Now, this really is 6, 7, 8 days of absolute luxury, and it's not nearly as expensive as you think it's going to be. Honestly, it's probably only the price of staying in a decent hotel, and everything else comes free. The actual journey, it's all inclusive in terms of food. You only pay for alcoholic drinks. There are a few extras on the ship if you want to, but you don't have to take them. Unfortunately, like most ships and many hotels, of course, solo travellers end up paying double because rooms are all geared around 2 people, so do bear that in mind. But look at the prices. I got a cabin on the Queen Mary 2, 7 days across the Atlantic for under £1,000. That's I think about $1,200, something like that at the moment. Now, that could be for 2 people as well, don't forget, which would really make it affordable. And for that, you get the full Queen Mary service, the full Cunard line experience with afternoon tea. There's health spas on board. There's so much activity to do. Or honestly, if you just want to quietly sit with a book in a bar all day long and just be on your own and chill out for 7 days, you can do that too. In the summer in particular, you absolutely would not know you're moving on a ship. I just didn't. I mean, I actually got an inside cabin with no windows. A, because it saved money, but B, I just didn't want to have the temptation to spend lots of time in my cabin. I wanted to go and explore the ship anyway. But so you would wake up in the morning, you wouldn't know what time it was. You absolutely couldn't feel any movement whatsoever. Obviously, at other times of the year, maybe in the spring, something like that, could be a little bit choppy. This is the world's only ocean liner, though. It's absolutely designed for this, so you know you're not going to get any of the horror stories you hear on small boats occasionally at sea. You will feel some movement, but that's about all. So pretty good, and honestly it is one of the great journeys of the world, and if that was the holiday alone, honestly it would be really brilliant. But there's so much more to it. When I got to New York, it was a question of getting to Penn Station, where the train went to take me right the way across the USA. Actually, the easiest way to do that, and I've got another video on this if you want to watch it, is to take the New York City water taxis. So it's a boat, little boat, goes from right next to Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, and will take you over to Manhattan, to Wall Street. You can get another ferry uptown if you want, which will take you closer to Penn Station, or you could just get a cab all the way across town. I do allow cabs. It's driving I don't like doing, but obviously one doesn't want to do it for too long a journey with a cab because of costs. So I actually broke my journey up. I had a few nights in New York, and also had a few nights in Chicago on the way, because, well, why wouldn't you? But if you wanted to do it all in one go, you can actually do it, and I'll maybe talk about that at the end. So the first train you get, I think is called the Lake Shore Limited, and that takes you from New York to Chicago. It leaves in the afternoon. You have evening meal on the train, you have overnight on the train, and you get into Chicago after breakfast the next morning. It's an older train. It's not the best, but it's not bad. And we're talking about really nice accommodation here on the train. You have a roomette, or I think there's a family one, and during the day you'll have seats so you can look out and just stare out the window. These are private rooms on the train, and the family one has room for 4 in, the normal roomette says for 2. And then what happens during the evening, the attendant will come round and they'll cleverly make the beds seats up into beds for you. Now here's the thing, they are of course bunk beds. One will be low down, normal bed, really nice and comfortable, but the other will be a bunk bed on the top. A lot of people aren't going to go for that, and I understand it. So what I noticed most people were doing, and I certainly did it, but then I was a solo traveller anyway, they were getting the roomettes for 2 when there was just one person, and if there were a couple, they were getting the family rooms for 4 and not using the top bunks at all. And again, when you look at the prices, it's not unreasonable to do that. So, you know, think of the bunks as an extra thing. The roomettes for 1 person, the large family rooms for 2 people. If you've got 4 and you've got 2 kids, they'll probably love the bunk beds, but that's fine. What's it like on the train? Well, the New York to Chicago one, as I mentioned, the scenery's not nearly as good as we're going to see on the next leg of our journey, but it's still great to just stare out the window, honestly. And I had books with me, I had videos to watch, and every time I did it for a few minutes, I found myself losing interest in them and going back to staring out the window again. You get taken down to the restaurant car for evening meal, and it's perfectly decent, and you can sit with other people. I met different people on every mealtime. They're lovely people, and they're doing it for so many different reasons, and there's Brits and there's lots and lots of Americans, of course, mainly Americans, although some of them were, if this was a big adventure for them, it was the first time they were going outside their state, all sorts of things. You know, I just heard so many great stories. You arrive in Chicago the next morning, then you have a few hours to kill, or a few days if you want to spend it in Chicago, which is what I did. And then in the afternoon, the California Zephyr train is ready to go. There are actually 3 routes to the West Coast from Chicago. One goes across to Seattle, one meanders down to San Francisco, and the other one goes down to Los Angeles. I took the middle one of the 3, so that was down to San Francisco. And this is 3 days on the train, starting with the first afternoon, counting as the first day, and 2 nights. And honestly, this is must be one of the great journeys of the world. And to think it's on Amtrak and is, you know, not a rip-off tourist thing, it's affordable prices, is quite incredible. So you spend the first afternoon heading across country. You have your evening meal, you go to bed that night, you wake up in the morning and you're just coming into Denver, Colorado. Amazing. There's a long stop in Colorado where they change stuff. You can actually get out and have a wander around for an hour or so if you want. And then the train goes and the train conductor comes on and says, let's go see some mountains, and you spend the second morning or the first full morning on the train winding your way up into the mountains. It's utterly astonishing. It's absolutely beautiful to see. But just when you think it can't get any better, this becomes one of the great journeys of the world, because you then spend the afternoon traveling down the Colorado River, alongside the river the whole time, which is astonishing. And then you go for your evening meal and you think this can't get any better, and you find yourself in the Utah desert watching sunset. I don't know, I had no words for it, nor did anyone else at the meal. It was astonishing. The second night on the train, you'll go through Salt Lake City, although you'll have to be up in the middle of the night to see that. I was so excited at all the night stops. You wake up the next morning and you have a lovely trip down through California all day long until you get to Oakland, where it finishes maybe late afternoon, early evening time. So that's your trip. It really is fantastic. Now, if you were noticing the timings, you didn't actually have to stay in any hotels at all. You could get the Queen Mary 2 across the Atlantic. It arrives about 6-7 in the morning. You've got plenty of time to get across New York to get to Penn Station to pick up the train. You have a night on the train. You arrive in Chicago early in the morning. You have a few hours. Then you pick up your next train. You have 2 hours on that 2 nights rather on that train, and away you go. You don't need a hotel for the whole trip. Now, as I say, I wanted to break the journey in New York and Chicago. Why wouldn't you? But it's amazing how the timing works. You'd have to check if it works so well coming back the other way. I think it does. Anyway, it's a trip that is amazing. You can take loads of luggage with you. There's not really a point in the journey transferring between ship and train, that sort of thing, in a cab. They're probably your difficult points, but actually you can bring plenty of luggage with you on the ship, and you can bring plenty of luggage with you on the train. I packed very light, but some people seem to have quite a lot. In fact, I did meet a couple who are literally moving from New York to San Francisco and using the train to do it, and they had a big trunk, and it was fantastic. So there you go, that's the way I did it. It's a really, really interesting, it's one of the great journeys of the world, actually. Europe to the west coast of the USA without flying or driving. Not for everybody, of course. Some people love flying, some people love driving, but for me, it was absolutely great. I hope you enjoyed listening to it and watching some of the shots, and stay tuned to the channel for more trips.